New York has a budget of $110 billion a year.
You're dealing with a little corruption here right now?
Are you kidding me? $5 million bathrooms?
They're arresting you.
This is chaos at its best. Your bureaucratic nest. They pocketed somewhere between $1 to $5 billion. We're equal opportunity here. Democrats and Republicans engage in this equally.
The great city of New York. Benjamin, thanks for meeting up.
New York is the city that invented grifting, it invented corruption. But what separates it from Chicago, it could stare itself in the face with sobriety and say, we can do better. It both invents the greatest corruption, the worst, the smartest forms, but then it figures out ways to improve it and to make this city really run. Crime is generally down about 4 to 5% across the board. Sides are down 40 to 50%, somewhere in there.
40 to 50?
40 to 50%.
Wow, that's
high
great.
level down. Youth have gone way up. That's largely due to a change in state law about when teenagers go to family court or when they go to adult court. It's more permissive now. Pretty low levels of satisfaction with New York City performance. About 25% of the populace is satisfied with the services that are being provided. Education concerns, public safety concerns, and the quality of what's being done in the city are the number one complaints here.
Okay.
When we think about New York, it's really important to think about how unique it is. It has a budget of $110 billion a year.
Wow.
That is more than 46 states in America. Only 4 states have budgets that are larger than the metropolitan New York City
Okay,
area.
so greater metro,
Yeah.
which is roughly around 20 mil.
Somewhere in there.
How's New York for you guys? You having a good time?
Yes, amazing time, yeah.
You're loving it?
Yeah, brilliant. We just came from Chicago. Chicago's cleaner.
I think it's different. This is chaos at its best. So we've got City Hall, but just adjacent to it is the Tweed Courthouse. Originally budgeted at about $250,000 in the 1860s, New York paid more than twice of what we paid for the state of Alaska. So that was about $14 million, which equates to today's dollars of about $250 to $300 million. Carpenters came in and they would make over $100,000 during that time frames period money in rooms that had no wood. So everything was padded, there was no work, or it was excessively billed for hours. 15% of it going back to the Tammany crew. They pocketed somewhere between $1 to $5 billion among their little run in New York. Now, Boss Tweed was eventually indicted on 204 counts of conspiracy, embezzlement, all these sorts of things using public funds for private purposes. And he tried to flee to Spain. He took a boat to Cuba, and then he went on over to Spain. So when he arrived in Spain, the authorities recognized him immediately, captured him, and brought him back to New York. He was found guilty in the very courthouse that he had built through his graft in corruption. New York, although it starts with these schemes and figuring out ways to bring thieves into public office, it brings some of the greatest minds who start thinking about things we take for granted today. How did we get civil service exams in government? It came out of the Tammany Hall affairs.
Okay.
How do we get the idea that, well, maybe the public needs some transparency about budgeting and about monetary figures from government? That came out of Tammany. And so they started to build in these protections in the law to be able to provide some level of accountability to the public. And I think that's a great thing. It's about beauty, of course, to see.
Beautiful
but
here.
is it worth more than twice the state of Alaska?
That is wild.
I think Alaskans might say no.
Being the corruption video it is with the corruption expert, how are our courts functioning overall? I know that's a wide question, but say at this level.
I think they function admirably well. And in particular in New York, the Southern District, the prosecutor's office here, has taken a very aggressive, no-nonsense stance when it comes to corruption and dealing with bad actors. The side you don't want to hear, the side your audience doesn't want to hear, the First Amendment also puts kind of limits on what people might want to be made corrupt or illegal, but there's a balance. So I think from the popular eye, there's probably more that people think should be done. I think they're doing pretty well.
And you were saying off camera, you're dealing with a little corruption here right now in New York.
Fire department summons. Generally, the fire department was the good agents, but with like nobody stopped working at the office, and they put everything into some computer system.
Yep.
And it keeps spitting out the same summons no matter how many times we show them the paperwork that we resolved it, and they're trying to get $1,000 from me. You know, and then they keep asking.
You're building here.
This is my building. This year they came in on January 6th, a Russian woman inspector, and they issued a summons instead of a notification.
Wow.
So you start off being in violation of the law, even though you have all of 2025 to to do the hydrostatic test. So that just starts it off. So of course we do everything by the book because you know you're going to have problems if you don't. But it's just, I'm literally on a carousel of getting notices saying violation has been cured, no further action is required.
And then you get a new violation.
You get a new violation.
In addition to police corruption in the 60s, as it turned out, New York City was gravely in debt to the tune of several $billions. It was tinkering on bankruptcy, publicly threatening that. It reached out to the federal government for a bailout, to which President Ford at the time famously said that they could drop it. He later reconsidered that, and there was limited federal aid for New York. But the question is, didn't we cure all the problems in 1870s, Tammany Hall? Didn't we get to the root of all this? And my insistent lesson to everyone is thieves continually get smarter and figure out new ways to purloin the public purse. And we have to be, those of us on the right and those of us on the left who care about this issue, have to be ever vigilant about this.
Benjamin, it's just a process of someone very savvy and corrupt figuring out how to maneuver the system, and then how fast can the system catch up with it, change the laws, and then how fast does the next opportunist go down that direction? It's just a constant game, huh?
And I think there's a usual set of actors, because if we go back to Tammany Hall, if we go back to Frank Serpico, what do we have? We usually have a whistleblower, someone who possesses extraordinary courage, someone who's willing to put their life on the line. But then it takes media, honest media, whether it's a left-leaning organization like the New York Times or a right-winger, James O'Keefe, any of these sorts of entities, to be able to take that story and run with it, show it to the American public, and then you usually have commissions of individuals, lawyers, political activists, folks who have been embedded in this, who can sit down and figure it out. I think New York's done a good job with their comptroller and some government agencies in giving them a little more power to root this out and to be able to find corruption. I'm not a big fan of government power or government authority, but in this area you do need some aggressive watchdogs, and sometimes it's not just the press and not just the courageous whistleblower. Sometimes you need that sort of comptroller, auditor, and the like.
Public restrooms.
Restrooms.
I don't see many, though, to be honest.
There aren't many.
Okay.
And so as they've worked on an initiative to build more, here's the more curious thing. It can cost, on average, somewhere between $2 to $5 million per new bathroom that they create. But when you look at other cities, they can do it on the cheap end, somewhere around $250,000, on average around $500,000 to create a bathroom. Now, not all of that is me creating some conspiracy hoax here, because New York has heightened cost of labor due to union presence, that adds in. So let's tack something on for that. We have different transportation costs, or being able to come in and bring heavy equipment and machinery incurs additional costs for contractors.
Yeah.
So that brings things up a bit, but probably not a scale of 10 times the price.
Okay, so
something's happening.
$3 to $5 million for just like a men's
standard,
and women's
ugly public bathroom
in a park type
in a
thing.
park. And New York doesn't have them. They know this, so as I've mentioned, they are doing a program to deploy more public bathrooms at exaggerated prices. There's been appropriate pushback on that. Are you kidding me? $5 million bathrooms that they're not penthouse like suites, that they're just average.
Right.
We have to get this under control. So I don't know what all the pieces are there, but my guess is there's a little bit of corruption. There's probably a little bit of some padding going on there. And I think as they investigate, New York will do what it does. Smart people will get together and they'll uncover the other smart people who weren't so ethical and figured out this program to get rich off of building public bathrooms in New York. And we'll have the details.
If you're to read the New York Times, you're not going to hear about the Democratic case.
Right.
And if you're reading what the Post here,
Yeah.
you're not going to hear about the Republican case. And that's the world we're in.
That's unfortunate.
Right? Or there's going to be a strong bias or skew, or in the Times, the Republican guy is going to have his eyes wide open, and then the lights like flooding out his face, so he's like pale white, and the Democratic guy is going to look better, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's the world we're in.
We've lost so much, right? Because as we noted a few times in the video, corruption's not a partisan issue.
Right.
If you're caught putting your son into favorable business positions for graft purposes, that's wrong, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, whether your team's doing it or not. Your bureaucratic nest is right here. I am usually prone not to be too fond of bureaucrats, but I'm going to show an element of good faith here and say they did a really good job in looking at abusive spending that happened during the recent asylum migrant crisis in New York. City of New York awarded a $482 million contract to a company called DocGo. And this was to provide emergency migrant housing, to buy up hotel spaces, hotel rooms, and the like. Right at the start of this, the comptroller of New York had concerns because DocGo barely had any business operations or experience and was a new entry. It was politically connected to actors in New York City. And New York decided that it would suspend all the usual rules that we have for competitive bidding and simply award it to somebody who looked good, well, somebody who was connected.
Right.
That studies that have gone into this show that about 80% of that $482 million, so about $500 million, were for unused rooms, were for hotels just sitting empty with not a single migrant in them, and a whole lot of money that came into DocGo. Similarly, there was another organization running an operation. It got a $287 million contract that ballooned to $987 million, almost $1 billion. And similar findings of suspicious spending, unused hotel rooms, a public facade of we're here to help the migrants and provide asylum resources when nothing was being delivered. And that was done by actual, and I'll give them credit this time, hardworking bureaucrats. Similar thing happened during the era. They dug into the receipts and they examined the spending that went on in all the unused material and the overbuying of masks, ventilators from politically connected vendors who went through no competitive bidding. So how did this all happen? Again, we had the 1870s, we had the 1960s and 1970s, we had real reforms, we put real teeth in, we were going to stop this, it was going to be the end of corruption. Well, we left a loophole. And what we said in New York was that if there is an emergency, well, we can put these rules aside. So as soon as government comes together and says emergency, then all the competitive bidding, all the things that would show transparency for spending go out the door. And what we're left with is people who are politically connected saying, I'll put together an LLC. I've got something here, and I don't know, it's going to cost $500 million. Does that sound good? Sounds good. Let's go do it. And this is literally what happened with DocGo on the ground. Maybe there are emergencies, but that doesn't mean that you should be able to spend money like a sailor for a year. Let's limit it to maybe a month. That's what they're thinking about right now. We'll give you emergency powers for a month, then you got to comply with the law. They may be investigating. There could be grand jury investigations going on for defrauding government. There's plenty of angles that you could use to prosecute this. What we do know is that at least good governance folks in New York are starting to say, yeah, we can't give that broad of a grant of spending authority just because government says emergency. More problems are going to pop up. Now we have laws in place that say if you abuse the public trust and do these things, you lose your New York State pension. That seems common sense. They're on the right track, so I'm optimistic.
That's good to hear, because I didn't think that was going to be the story today.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming along on that journey. Until the next one.